The auctioneer's voice cracked like a whip over the noise of the Bitter Springs depot. Ada Thornton stood at the edge of the crowd, one hand pressed against the swell of her belly, watching men get sold like cattle. The August sun burned the back of her neck. $1, she heard herself say. The crowd went silent. Every face turned toward her, and Ada felt the weight of their stares like stones. She hadn't planned to speak, hadn't planned to be here at all, but the man slumped on the platform, blood soaking through the makeshift bandage on his shoulder, face gray as ash, had looked at her, just for a second, and something in his eyes made her mouth open before her mind could catch up. The auctioneer squinted at her. "Ma'am, this here's a labor auction. These boys are wounded veterans, need work and shelter. You sure you want to?" $1, Ada repeated. Her voice didn't shake this time. She pushed through the crowd, ignoring the whispers that followed her like flies. The coins felt heavy in her palm when she dropped them into the auctioneer's hand. Up close, the soldier looked worse. His dark hair stuck to his forehead with sweat. A week's worth of beard shadowed his jaw, but his eyes, pale blue, sharp despite the pain, fixed on her face. "Can you walk?" she asked. He nodded once, tried to stand. His legs buckled. Ada caught his good arm, bearing more of his weight than she should have. The baby kicked hard against her ribs, protesting. She bit back a gasp. "Lean on me, my wagon's not far." They made it 3 steps before Mrs. Hadley's voice cut through the air. "Ada Thornton, have you lost your senses? A woman in your condition taking in a strange man." Ada kept walking. The soldier's breath came in short, painful bursts against her ear. "Your husband's only been gone 4 months, Mrs. Hadley continued, loud enough for everyone to hear. "What will people think?" Ada stopped, turned her head just enough to meet the older woman's eyes. "They'll think what they always think, Helen. Makes no difference to me anymore." The ride back to her homestead took 30 minutes. The soldier didn't speak, just gripped the wagon seat with his good hand while his body swayed with each rut in the road. Ada focused on the horses, on the familiar path through the scrub brush and red dirt. Not on the man beside her, not on what she'd just done. Her cabin sat in a shallow valley, a small barn and chicken coop behind it. The garden she'd planted in spring had withered in the drought. She pulled the wagon up close to the porch. "I've got a room off the kitchen," she said. "Used to be for storing provisions, but it's clean, has a bed." He tried to climb down on his own, nearly fell. This time Ada didn't catch him, just watched as he steadied himself against the wagon wheel, breathing hard. "Stubborn," she muttered. "Yes, ma'am." His voice was rough, unused. She showed him the room. It was small, barely bigger than a closet, but the narrow bed had fresh sheets, and the window let in the evening breeze. He sank onto the mattress like a man who hadn't slept in days. "I'll bring water," Ada said, "and I need to look at that shoulder." When she returned with the basin and clean cloth, he'd managed to remove his shirt. The wound was worse than she'd thought. The bullet had gone clean through, but infection had set in. The skin around it was hot and red. "This needs proper doctoring," she said. "Can't afford a doctor." "Neither can I." Ada dipped the cloth in water. "But I've dealt with infected wounds before. My husband," she stopped, started again. "I know what to do." She worked in silence, cleaning the wound as gently as she could. He didn't make a sound, but she felt his body go rigid with each touch. When she finished, she bound it with clean bandages. "What's your name?" she asked. He hesitated, something flickered in his eyes, fear or maybe guilt. Thomas Garrett." The cloth slipped from Ada's hand. "What did you say?" "Thomas Garrett." He watched her face. "From the 4th Colorado Infantry." Ada's legs went weak. She sat down hard on the wooden chair by the bed. "No, that's not possible." "You're Ada." It wasn't a question. "Ada Thornton, married to Daniel Thornton 3 years ago in Fort Collins." The room tilted. Ada pressed both hands against her knees, trying to steady herself. "How do you know that?" Thomas leaned back against the wall, his face pale. "Because Daniel Thornton was my brother." The words hung in the air between them. Ada couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Daniel had never mentioned a brother. In 3 years of marriage, he'd never said a word about family, about anyone from his life before her. "You're lying," she whispered. "I wish I was." Thomas closed his eyes. "We hadn't spoken in 8 years, not since I left home, but when the war started, we both enlisted, served in different companies, different regiments. I only found out he'd died when I saw his name on the casualty list at Fort Union." Ada's hands moved to her stomach, protective. "Daniel died at Glorietta Pass. They sent me his things, his rifle, his coat, a letter he'd started writing to me. He never mentioned a brother in any of his letters." "He wouldn't have." Thomas opened his eyes. They were the same blue as Daniel's. How had she not seen it immediately? "We parted on bad terms. I did something." He stopped, swallowed hard. "I hurt him, badly. He had every right to pretend I didn't exist." "Why are you here?" Ada stood up fast, the chair scraping against the floor. "Why Bitter Springs? Why would you?" Understanding hit her like a fist. "You came looking for me." "Yes. Why?" Thomas met her gaze, and the raw honesty in his face made her chest ache. "Because Daniel wrote to me 2 weeks before he died. First letter I'd gotten from him in 8 years. He told me he'd married, that you were expecting, and he said," his voice cracked, "he said if anything happened to him, he wanted me to make sure you were all right, that you and the baby had what you needed." Ada's vision blurred. She turned away, gripping the door frame. "Get out." "Ada, get out of my house." She heard him move, heard the pain in his breathing as he tried to stand. But she couldn't look at him, couldn't let him see her cry. "I'll be gone at first light," Thomas said quietly. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have come." Ada didn't turn around until she heard his footsteps retreat. Then she sank to the floor and let the grief take her. She woke on the kitchen floor as dawn light crept through the windows. Her back ached. The baby was moving, restless. Ada pulled herself up, using the table for support, and looked toward the small room. The door was open. The bed was empty. Something twisted in her chest, not relief, not quite. She found him in the barn, pitching hay one-handed to her 2 horses. His face was drawn with pain, but he moved with determination. Sweat darkened his shirt. "What are you doing?" Ada asked from the doorway. "Thomas didn't stop working, earning my keep. I told you to leave. You told me to get out of your house." He finally looked at her. "You didn't say anything about the barn." Despite everything, Ada felt a flicker of something almost like amusement. "You can't work with that shoulder." "I can do more than you think." He set down the pitchfork. "Ada, I know you don't want me here, but I made a promise to my brother, and I don't break my promises, not anymore. You don't owe me anything." "Maybe not." He moved closer, and she saw the exhaustion in his face, the fever still burning in his eyes. "But I owe Daniel, and this is the only way I can ever make things right." Ada studied him, saw the guilt etched into every line of his face. Whatever had happened between the brothers, it had carved itself deep. 3 months, she heard herself say. "Until the baby comes. You can stay until then, work for your room and board. After that, we're done." Thomas nodded slowly. "Fair enough." The days fell into a rhythm. Thomas worked despite his injury, doing what he could, mending fences, repairing the barn door that had hung crooked all summer, splitting firewood. Ada cooked and cleaned, tended the chickens, tried to keep the garden alive with precious well water. They didn't talk much. But she noticed things, the way he favored his left hand, the careful way he moved, like a man who'd learned to carry pain, the fact that he never complained. One evening, 2 weeks after he'd arrived, she found him on the porch, cleaning Daniel's rifle. She'd given it to him that morning for hunting. He handled it with the ease of someone who'd lived with weapons. "How did you know Daniel?" she asked, sitting in the other chair. Thomas looked up, surprised. It was the first personal question she'd asked. "We grew up on a farm in Missouri," he said, "just the two of us and our parents. Daniel was older by 3 years, always looking out for me, teaching me things." He ran his hand along the rifle barrel. "When I was 19, I got involved with the wrong people, gamblers mostly, lost money our family didn't have. Daniel covered the debt, nearly lost the farm doing it." Ada listened, her hands folded over her belly. I left the next day, Thomas continued. Couldn't face him, couldn't face what I'd done. Spent the next 8 years drifting. Texas, New Mexico, California, sending money home when I had it, but never a letter, never an apology. He set the rifle down. Daniel wrote to me in April, care of the fort I was stationed at. The letter found me 3 weeks later. By then, he was already dead. What did the letter say? Ada asked quietly. Thomas pulled a folded paper from his pocket. It was worn soft from handling. He didn't offer it to her, just held it like something precious. It said he forgave me, that he'd forgiven me years ago, but I'd never stayed in one place long enough to tell me. And it said, his voice roughened, it said he wanted me to meet you, that you'd made him happier than he ever thought possible, that I'd like you. Ada's throat closed. He was right, Thomas said, I do like you. The words sat between them, simple and honest. Ada didn't know what to say, didn't know what she felt. So she just sat there as the sun went down and the crickets started singing and let herself feel something other than alone. The rumors started in town. Ada went to Bitter Springs once a week for supplies, and every time she felt the weight of stares and whispers. Mrs. Hadley made sure everyone knew about the man living on Ada Thornton's property, the pregnant widow with a strange veteran in her barn. They're talking, Ada told Thomas one night after a particularly difficult trip to the general store. Saying things. I can leave, Thomas said immediately. No, the word came out fierce. Ada surprised herself. No, let them talk. I don't care what they think. But she did care. She'd always cared. And it wore on her, the judgment, the assumptions. She saw it in the way women pulled their children closer when she passed, in the way the shopkeeper took longer to serve her. Thomas started coming to town with her, not to silence the rumors, nothing would do that, but to carry the heavy supplies, to stand between her and the ugliest stares. He never said he was her brother-in-law, never explained, just stood there, silent and solid. One afternoon in late September, Ada was hanging laundry when she felt the first real contraction, not the false ones she'd been having for weeks, but something different, deeper. She grabbed the clothesline, breathing through it. Thomas was at the fence line, but something made him look up. He dropped the post he was holding and ran. How long? He asked, reaching her. Just started. Ada let him guide her to the house. Could be hours yet. It was hours. Night fell. The contractions came closer together. Ada walked the floor of her bedroom while Thomas boiled water, gathered clean linens, did everything she told him to do. His face was white, his hands steady. I can ride for the midwife, he said. She's 3 hours away. Ada gripped the bedpost. You wouldn't make it in time. Ada. I need you here. She looked at him, and the fear she'd been holding back broke through. Please, don't leave me. Thomas took her hand. I'm not going anywhere. He stayed, through the long night, through the pain, through the moment when Ada thought she couldn't do this, couldn't survive this. He held her hand and wiped her face and told her she was strong, she was doing it, she was almost there. The baby came just before dawn. A boy, small but healthy, with a full head of dark hair and lungs that worked fine. Ada held him against her chest, crying, Daniel, she whispered. His name is Daniel. Thomas stood by the window, his back to her. His shoulders shook. Thomas, Ada said softly. He turned, tears ran down his face. He looks like him, Thomas said. Your son, he looks just like Daniel when he was born. I was 3 years old, but I remember thinking he was the most perfect thing I'd ever seen. Ada held out her hand. Come meet your nephew. Thomas came closer, moving carefully, like he was afraid to break the moment. He looked down at the baby, and something in his face transformed. All the guilt, all the pain, softened into wonder. Hello, Danny, he said. I'm your Uncle Thomas, and I promise you I'm going to be the uncle your father deserved. The weeks after Danny's birth blurred together. Ada was exhausted, overwhelmed, grateful. Thomas took over the heavy work completely, insisted she rest. He'd appear with meals she didn't remember him cooking. He'd rock Danny when she was too tired to move. He never complained, never asked for anything. One evening in October, Ada found him in the barn, repairing a broken bridle. The work was delicate, requiring both hands. His shoulder had healed well. "Your 3 months are almost up," she said. Thomas's hands stilled. "Yes. I've been thinking," Ada stepped closer, "about what happens next." He didn't look up. "I'll find work in town, come by sometimes to check on you both, if that's all right. Or you could stay." Now he did look up, hope and caution warred in his face. "Not in the barn," Ada continued. "There's a second bedroom in the house, small but better than where you've been sleeping, and this ranch needs 2 people to run it properly, especially now with Danny." She paused. "Besides, he should know his uncle." Ada, Thomas set down the bridle. "People already talk, if I move into the house." "Let them talk." Ada found she meant it. "They've decided what they think anyway. Might as well have help and company while they're judging me." Thomas smiled then, slow and genuine. It changed his whole face. "You're sure?" "I'm sure." He moved into the house that weekend. The second bedroom became his, and slowly, carefully, their life reshaped itself around this new arrangement. Thomas taught Ada to shoot, standing behind her in the yard, adjusting her grip. Ada taught Thomas how to soothe Danny when he cried, laughing at his panicked expression. They worked side by side, their conversations growing longer, easier. Thomas told stories about Daniel as a boy. Ada told stories about Daniel as a husband. Together, they kept him alive. One night in December, after Danny was asleep, they sat by the fire. Snow had started falling outside, early for bitter springs. "Can I ask you something?" Ada said. "Anything." "The debt you owed, the one Daniel covered, was it really that bad?" Thomas stared into the flames. $500, which doesn't sound like much until you realize our entire farm was worth about 300. Daniel sold his horse, his rifle, everything he'd saved for his own future, went into debt himself to cover what I'd lost in a single night of poker. Ada drew in a breath. "The worst part," Thomas continued, "wasn't the money. It was that he never said a word against me, just paid it, looked at me and said, 'I hope it was worth it.' That's all. And I knew it had broken something between us." He finally looked at her. "I've spent 8 years trying to figure out how to fix it. Then I realized I couldn't. All I could do was try to be the man he believed I could become." "He forgave you," Ada said. "In his letter, he forgave you." "I know, but I'm still working on forgiving myself." Ada understood that, the weight of things that couldn't be changed, the way guilt lived in your bones. "You're here," she said, "keeping his son safe, keeping his wife," she stopped, corrected, "keeping me safe. I think that's enough." Thomas held her gaze. "Is that what you are, his wife still?" The question hung in the air. Ada felt her heartbeat quicken. "I don't know," she admitted. "I loved Daniel, I'll always love him, but he's gone, and I'm still here, still living." "Still living," Thomas echoed softly. They didn't speak about it again, but something had shifted. Ada found herself watching Thomas more, the way he smiled at Danny, the way he'd fixed the porch railing without being asked, the way he'd started humming while he worked. And sometimes she'd catch him watching her, too, his expression unreadable. Winter deepened, the rumors in town continued, but they felt distant now, less important. Ada's world had shrunk to this small homestead, this unlikely family. In February, Danny took sick, a fever that spiked high and fast. Ada stayed up 3 nights straight, sponging him down with cool water, trying to get him to nurse. Thomas rode through a blizzard to fetch the doctor. When the fever finally broke, Ada collapsed. She woke in her own bed, sun streaming through the window. Thomas sat in the chair beside her, Danny asleep in his arms. "How long?" Ada asked, her voice hoarse. 2 days, Doc said you'd worn yourself out, ordered rest." Thomas smiled tiredly. "Danny's fine, eating well, sleeping better, he's tough, like his mother." Ada's eyes filled with tears. "I was so scared." "I know." Thomas shifted Danny carefully, then reached out and took her hand. "But you didn't have to be scared alone." His hand was warm, calloused from work. Ada didn't pull away. "Thomas," she whispered, "what are we doing?" I don't know, his thumb traced her knuckles, but I don't want to stop. People will. I don't care about people, his voice was fierce. I care about you, about Danny, about this life we've built, and I think, he paused, I think Daniel would want this, would want you to be happy, would want his son to have a father. Ada's breath caught. You think he'd be all right with it, with us? I think, Thomas said slowly, he loved you enough to want you to have everything, even if it wasn't with him. They sat in silence, the baby between them, the future uncertain but no longer frightening. Spring came, the drought broke, Ada's garden flourished, Danny grew stronger, louder, more demanding. And on an April evening, 1 year after Thomas had first stumbled off that auction platform, Ada found him on the porch, watching the sunset. She stood beside him, their shoulders touching. I've been thinking, she said. Dangerous, Thomas teased. About what you said, about Daniel wanting me to be happy. She took a breath. I am happy, with you, with this life, and I think I'd like to stop pretending we're just two people sharing a house. Thomas turned to face her. What are you saying? I'm saying I want more, if you do. He cupped her face in his hands, gentle, reverent. Ada Thornton, I have wanted more since the moment you caught me when I could barely stand, but I didn't think I had the right to ask. You don't have to ask, Ada said. I'm telling you. He kissed her then, soft and careful, like she was something precious. And maybe she was. Maybe they both were, two broken people who'd found a way to be whole. When they pulled apart, Ada laughed, the sound surprised and bright. What? Thomas asked. I paid $1 for you, she said. Best dollar I ever spent. Thomas grinned. Guess that makes me cheap. Or priceless. Inside, Danny started crying. They both turned toward the sound, moving together like they'd done it 1,000 times. And in the doorway, Thomas caught her hand. Thank you, he said. For what? For seeing past who I was, for letting me prove who I could be. Ada squeezed his hand. That's what family does. They went inside together, the door closed behind them, and somewhere in the space between memory and hope, Ada felt something like peace. Daniel was gone. The grief would always be there, a scar that never fully faded, but scars meant you'd survived. Scars meant you'd healed. And she had, they both had. The cabin glowed warm against the deepening dusk. Smoke rising from the chimney, voices and laughter drifting through the windows. A home, a family, a second chance bought for $1 and built on forgiveness, hard work, and the courage to let go of the past. In Bitter Springs, people would talk for years about Ada Thornton and the wounded soldier, but Ada stopped listening to the talk. She had better things to do, a ranch to run, a son to raise, a man to love who loved her back with the fierce devotion of someone who knew what it meant to lose everything and be given a second chance. Some stories don't end the way they begin. Some grief transforms into grace. And sometimes, the person you need most walks into your life when you least expect it, broken and bleeding, asking nothing but the chance to prove their worth. Ada gave Thomas that chance. And in return, he gave her everything.